Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back. On today's Niall Gardens, it's all about what is underneath my feet. Grass, and in particular, grass paths. I'm going to share with you my 5 reasons why I really do not like grass paths, why I think they may not actually be the right choice for you, and why I'm choosing to get rid of all of mine here in the vegetable garden. It's been a while since I've shown you very much of the vegetable garden, and that's been for a very good, well, actually, a very bad reason. Just look at the state of it. Everywhere you look, my beautiful vegetable garden that I created last year is now just a little bit tatty and truthfully a little bit dishevelled. Part of that, yes, is the time of year. And part of that is that I haven't been able to give it as much TLC and attention as I would have liked, but I realised that one really big part is because of what's underneath my feet, the grass paths. So I've made a decision. All of the grass is going, but I thought you might find it useful to understand my reasons why I'm changing it, why I'm getting rid of the grass, and why I really do not like grass paths. Okay, on to the very first reason, and it is by far the biggest downside of having grass paths, and that is sheer workload. When it's mowed, the grass in between all of these raised beds makes the whole space look really lovely. But that comes at a cost, and that cost to me is time. So let me give you an insight into the reality of having these grass paths in this vegetable garden. This space is about 19 metres long by about 7 metres wide, and it's got 14 individual raised beds in it, each spaced about 1 metre apart to create all of the paths. That means that there are just endless narrow passages to cut, 64 edges, yes, 64 edges to each go along with the strimmer to remove all of this really long stuff, and as you can imagine, a huge amount of manoeuvring with the lawnmower. On a good day, this takes me at least an hour and a half just to cut, and that's on a good day. When you think about it, that's an hour and a half of working on something in a productive space that doesn't actually make the space more productive. Plus, it's just flat out tiring, and that's assuming that you stay on top of the job, which, as you can see, I haven't. This summer has been incredibly busy for me, and keeping the paths mown was simply a job that fell by the wayside. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had any time to actually dedicate to the beds themselves and the plants that I want to grow in them. And when you think about it, isn't that such a shame? So if you're thinking of doing the same and having grass paths, particularly in a productive space, really ask yourself if you'll have the ongoing time and, most importantly, the inclination to give grass paths the care they need. And remember that all of that work on your grass paths is either going to be before or after you do anything else. Look how bad this corner is. You can barely even see that they're raised beds. Now, I'm aware that the next reason is one that's very personal to me, and most of you may not just see this as a thing, but I hate, and I mean hate, walking on wet grass in gardens. And in the winter, my garden here gets really quite wet and squishy because it has very little slope and water runoff. To me, it just feels like treading on grass smashes it up, damages it, and makes patches really muddy and ugly. So I find myself walking more gingerly on it. Now, that is definitely stuff in my head, but it's a real issue when it comes to high tread areas or areas where you're going to be doing serious work, like here in a vegetable garden. Hauling stuff around, wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow, means that the grass will take a lot of punishment. Yes, it'll grow back, but it can make for a pretty unpleasant experience in the winter. And when the grass gets long, particularly because it hasn't been mowed, it just leaves you with wet feet, wet trousers and wet knees if you want to just kneel down and get some work done. If you don't mind walking on wet squishy grass, go for it. But if you don't, grass ain't the best choice for you. So what am I going to do about it? Well, rather than simply moaning to you about how much I hate my grass paths, I'm going to make a change. And over the winter, I am going to make a really big change. All of the grass that you can see underneath my feet, and the weeds, of course, will be going entirely to be replaced instead with gravel. It's going to be a big job to get done, but I think it's really going to be worth it. And it's going to be another step towards making this veg garden the veg garden that I have in my head. And best of all, there'll be no more mowing of the grass in here. But we're not quite done yet with the reasons, so on to reason number 3. Okay, weeds. My experience has been that having grass paths has actually led to way more weed problems in my raised beds. Now, granted, that has not been helped by me letting the grass, and of course the weeds in it, grow unchecked to such a degree. But I think that happening is a realistic prospect for many people, particularly busy people, and it's something that could happen to all of us. Every garden has their own mix of weeds, and here, one of the most widespread, creeping, pernicious weeds is creeping buttercup. And what I've become really aware of is no matter how well I keep the beds weeded, the weeds that grow along the edge of my raised beds really continue to thrive, particularly when they don't get cut. Then all they do is they power through underneath the planks and pop back up in my lovely growing areas. I mentioned earlier about how I don't think a walking surface should be something that requires work to the detriment of your actual gardening. Well, I'm going to add to that. You don't want a surface that actually gives you more weed problems if you don't stay on top of it. Reason number 4 is that for me, I don't find grass really that practical a surface. We've already talked about what it's like when it's too wet, too long, or damaged from overuse in really high tread areas. But I've often found that it also just makes other things awkward. For instance, if you put patio furniture down, you end up having to shift it around when you need to mow the grass. If you want to add extra pots, like I've done here, like this summer I had pots with lovely lily flowers. I also have my oca and my mashua plants in big pots. They need to move as well every time. And this all ends up being a little bit like, you know, those little plastic jigsaw games where you can't just lift out the pieces, you can only slide one piece around at a time. I find that really frustrating. Also, have you ever left a hose lying on grass for any amount of time? If not, let me tell you from bitter experience, the grass smothers it really quickly, binds it down onto the ground, and then that is very inconvenient, let me tell you, when you're trying to get it untangled. On top of all of this, if you leave things sitting on the grass like these pots for any length of time, it'll kill the grass that's underneath, leaving you with unsightly gaps. Gaps where the grass is not going to regrow, weeds take its space. So for me, it just doesn't function as a really tough, practical surface. Finally, reason number 5 is a universal truth, and that is that grass is ever growing. In the veg garden here, I like that it's got quite a formal look. The raised beds, the arches, the formal layout. And here's the thing, it's not that I don't like the look of grass paths. I actually really do. But it's more that that nice, clean, crisp look is only ever temporary. Grass is transient. Just like a lawn, the grass paths only stay looking crisp and sharp for a short time. I've already said that for me, I find it a lot of work to cut and edge this whole area, even only once. But within a matter of days, when the grass growth is going full pelt, it looks like nothing was ever done. And I actually find that kind of thing a little bit demoralizing, which then leads back into the workload problem. Do I want to have to keep on top of mowing and edging and tending grass just to keep it looking a certain way, when actually it's only meant to be acting as a path? No, I do not. What you use as paths in your own gardens, I know, is very much a personal thing in terms of what you find practical, what you find attractive, and what you just enjoy having and looking after. But hopefully going through my reasons will help you make your own decisions and help you find what works best for you, particularly if you're at the stage of designing your own garden. And until next time, see you later.